So we've got a dilemma or a paradox, because on the one hand, the half shekel does not seem to fit the way that things work generally in the world of holiness, and specifically in the Beis HaMikdash, because the world of holiness is always supposed to be whole. In fact, there's even an expression in the Zohar that says Hashem only dwells in a complete environment. That's why, for example, you have to have a minyan. It's a complete number of people. And yet here, you've got this money that's not just a donation. This is the money that's going to run the service in the Beis HaMikdash every single day, and the contribution is specifically not a whole coin. It's specifically the half shekel. And here's the paradox. On the other hand, the way that you donate the amounts is not to take the mini coins, the 10 Geira coins, and donate them over a period of time. It specifically has to be a single half shekel coin at one time. So it seems paradoxical, because what are you saying? That it's not about being whole, but it is about being whole. The item is not a whole item. The action has to be a single whole action. Doesn't seem to match. So needless to say, if you want to answer this kind of a question, obviously what you have to do is say, what is the half shekel about? What does it represent? What does it symbolize? So let's see if we could work this out. Why do you think that you have to give a half a shekel instead of a full shekel? What kind of a lesson could it teach us?
I would think that we give half, Hashem brings the half.
Great. So it shows partnership, right? Some people will tell you that the half shekel illustrates the unity between the Jewish people. So no one person is a full picture on their own, and therefore you have to have other people in your life. And so it's a symbol of Jewish unity, which would explain why it's related to the communal sacrifices. Because this money is going to be used for things that involve the entire community, so it makes sense that the symbolism should be about bringing people together. But the truth is, we're going to go down this route, which is that the half shekel represents that we are half the story, and Hashem is the other half of the story. Now, obviously you don't mean to say, God forbid, that it's like two equal halves, like us and Hashem. But the implication is that we're not complete. That's really the implication. We, as individuals, with all of our achievements, all of our talents, all of our greatness, we're not complete. And so we need Hashem in the picture. It's not exactly the same as marriage, but it's similar in a sense. You know, we always talk about the fact that when a couple gets married, it's like two halves of a soul. So it's a similar kind of concept. You know, there's another way to express that getting married is like two halves of a soul. They say that before a person gets married, he is only half a man. And then once he gets married, he's finished. Right? So that's the... Right? So that's not what we're talking about over here. What do we mean when we say that there were two halves? So I'll tell you another interesting little anecdote from the Torah that really illustrates the same point. One of the mitzvahs the Jews had in the desert is that Hashem tells Moshe they have to make silver trumpets. Remember this? They had to make silver trumpets. And the purpose of those trumpets was to either alert the community to certain things or to gather the community for certain things. So they would blow the trumpet before Shabbos so that you would know that now it's time to stop working. They would blow the trumpet to gather everybody if Moshe had to address the nation. They'd blow the trumpets in order to herald a war. So depending on what kind of tune or what kind of blasts of the trumpet it was, you would know what kind of a response the community had to have. Does anybody remember what you call the silver trumpets? Okay, it's not a common word. So the silver trumpets are called chatzotzros. Chatzotzros. Okay, the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, and obviously a great Hasidic master, says that the word chatzotzros is a play on words, because in that word you can hear the word chatzi, which is half, and you can hear the word tsurois, which are images. And so he says that the word chatzotzros means chatzi tsurois. That besides the fact that they were obviously real silver trumpets, and they actually used them and they blew them, etc. But the implication of the trumpets, what they represent, is half images. They are supposed to represent our relationship with Hashem, that we are half the picture, and Hashem fills in the rest of the picture. So you'll notice, I'm not saying Hashem is half the picture, because that you can't say, that's disrespectful. But we're a part of the picture, and Hashem completes the picture. It's the same message in the half shekel. The half shekel is to say, I'm going to come forward, I'm going to contribute, I'm going to donate, which doesn't only represent financial contribution, it represents any contribution that I make. I'm going to approach Hashem, I'm going to do for Hashem. I have to realize whatever I'm going to do is only part of the picture. The rest of the picture is for Hashem to do. Now let's understand practically, what does that really look like? What does it really look like? There is a verse in Tanakh that goes like this. Mi hikdimani va'ashalem. Hashem says, who preceded me that I should have to pay them? In other words, what's Hashem saying? Hashem is saying, you, whatever you have, is because of me. You never came before me. So therefore, I don't have to pay you anything. You have to pay me everything. What does that mean? So the Gemara takes that pasuk, and the Gemara relates it to certain mitzvahs. Let's use these mitzvahs. We'll go through the mitzvahs, and we'll see how this principle works. So there's a mitzvah to wear tzitzis, right? So now let's apply this principle. Hashem says, Mi hikdimani. Who got there before me? Who did something before me that now I owe them something? In other words, implying you now owe me something. Under what circumstances does a person have to wear tzitzis?
He's barmy.
Is what?
After barmy. No, from...
No.
Sorry.
Years old.
No?
Yeah,
Oh, that's true, but under what circumstances?
what circumstances?
Under what circumstances? If you have a four-cornered garment. That's what the Torah says. The Torah says that if you have a four-cornered garment, then you are required to put tzitzis on those four corners. The fact that we make a point of getting a four-cornered garment is to show our enthusiasm to do a mitzvah. But from the Torah's perspective, you only have to put tzitzis on your garment if you have a four-cornered garment. Says the Gemara, that's what the pasuk means. Hashem says, you didn't put me to the post. I gave you a mitzvah that you only have to do once you have resources. Who gave you those resources? Who made you have the money to be able to afford to have tzitzis? That was my bracha to you. So it's not like you are now going out on a limb in order to do my mitzvah. I'm giving you the resources, therefore you could do the mitzvah. The second example that the Gemara uses is something less known. It's called a ma'akeh. Ma'akeh is a security rail that you have to put on your roof. So if you've got a house that's got a flat roof, then halachically you have to put up a security rail around that roof so nobody falls. And by extension, if you have a double-story house, then you have a mitzvah to put some kind of a fence on the landing of the stairs between the two levels. Or if you have a balcony, you have a mitzvah to put a fence around the balcony. And by the way, next time you build a balcony, you have to consult with the rabbi whether or not you have the opportunity to make a bracha when you put up the fence, right? Because a mitzvah in the Torah. And by extension, even though it's not identical, but by extension, you have to put a fence around a swimming pool. It's the same halacha. Anything that could, God forbid, endanger somebody, you are required halachically to secure it. So the Gemara says the same thing. Mi hikdimani va'ashalem. I asked you to put a fence around your house. Clearly, that means I already gave you a house. If I hadn't blessed you to have a house, you would never have this obligation. So we're going to take that principle as the Gemara teaches it, and we're going to expand it out to its broadest sense, which is basically, if bringing this half shekel is supposed to represent how I contribute to Hashem, the message is, I'm only contributing the part that comes after Hashem has already given me the resources. So in order to contribute the half a shekel, obviously I have to have some shekels. Otherwise, how on earth would I contribute? And the implication is that it's supposed to be how a Jewish person views themselves holistically. not just in the context of this particular mitzvah, but this is how a Jew is supposed to see themselves all together. I am only part of the picture. So whatever I have done in my life, whatever successes I have, whatever achievements I've made, I need to realize that's only a part of the picture. There's another whole part of the picture, which is that Hashem gave me the talent, gave me the resource, allowed me to wake up this morning. And so therefore, my entire approach to life has to be a very humble and appreciative approach. Not this, swagger of saying, hey, look at me, I've achieved, I've done, I'm an amazing person, the so-called self-made man, or whatever the case is. I have to realize, no, that's only a part of the picture. And rather than to just say that it's equal halves, it's probably fair to say we're just the tip of the iceberg of a whole massive set of resources that Hashem endowed us with long before we even started to contribute. But it goes further than that. This is not just about talents and about resources, even though that's a very important thing, and that obviously helps us to shape our perspective, and it helps us to keep us humble, and it helps us to feel gratitude, but it's actually more than that. Because, let's take it from a completely different angle. If my self, my conscious self, and even my subconscious self, and even my soul is only part of the picture, and Hashem is the rest of the picture, then what do I want more than anything else? I want to be a whole picture. Nobody wants to. Can you imagine when a person discovers that what I'm living, what I'm experiencing, what I'm aware of is just the tip of the iceberg, and there is this whole mega aspect to myself, my neshama, my connection to Hashem, etc., that's kind of lying there beneath the surface, then I surely should be motivated to want to connect to that whole sense of who I am. In other words, what the half shekel represents is the realization that the ultimate state of a person is the state where they are connected to Hashem. If I'm not connected to Hashem, there's a massive chunk of who I am that I'm not accessing. If I'm not connected to Hashem, I don't really feel the real power of myself. I don't really experience the real version of myself. So my whole life should be oriented towards how do I connect to Hashem? Because if I connect to Hashem and I, so to speak, unveil that other part, that other half of the picture, then I'm going to be the real me. Then I'm going to experience my neshama. Then I'm going to be operating at the highest level. So the half shekel really represents the yearning of the conscious human to connect with the superconscious part of the human that connects to Hashem. In other words, what is a half shekel? I want to find my connection to Hashem. That's really what it is. I'm only part of the picture. Hashem is the rest of the picture. I want to connect to Hashem. That's what the half shekel represents. That makes perfect sense then. Why it should be a half? Our question was, how can you have something in the world of holiness that is specifically a fraction, where everything else in the world of holiness is always whole and pure and complete? Well, that's because the ultimate experience of holiness as a human being is to realize that I am not complete. That is holiness. The ultimate blockage to holiness is when a person thinks I am complete. I often joke about this, when people ask you how you're doing, right? So there's certain stock standard answers that people give when you ask them, you greet them, how are you? So some people just say fine, thanks, and you. It's like a very common response that people give. I know a guy who he had a very dry and dark sense of humor. So people used to say, how are you? He used to say, I'm dead. And of course, nobody really listens. So people would say, fine, thanks, and you. Right? In any event, more recently, what you find sometimes you ask people either how they are, or more likely you offer somebody something, right? Let's say you're hosting somebody at a meal. So would you like a second helping? So in today's world, people say, I'm good. Right? Once upon a time, you say, no, thank you. Now people say, I'm good. So that implication, implication of saying, I'm good, so that basically implies, I don't need anything else. I don't need anything more in my life. I'm doing fine. That is the opposite of holiness. Holiness is, I haven't even begun the process. Whatever I've learned, whatever I've done, whatever I've achieved, I haven't begun the process because there's infinite Hashem to connect with. So that's what we're saying over here. No matter where I am, no matter how great I am, no matter how respected I am, no matter how much achievement I've made, I always have to see myself as a fraction. Because there is always greater connection that I could have to Hashem. So the holiest version of myself is not whole. And the most arrogant version of myself feels whole, which is a blockage to holiness. That's the message of the half shekel, on the one hand. On the other hand, we've said that to contribute the half shekel has to be a single act, a single donation, all at once, in one shot. What does that mean? Who's going to get to a point of connection to Hashem in one shot? This is a lifelong endeavor, and even then it's not guaranteed that I'll make it. So how could it be in one shot? So let's think about it. In which area of life, or in which experience of Judaism, does a person most clearly express their connection to Hashem or their wish to connect to Hashem? Where do you see that more powerfully than anywhere else? More in shul. Okay, why in shul? Okay, so the Shema doesn't have to be in shul. I mean, it should be, obviously, but it doesn't have to be in shul. So let's unpack these. Why do you say in shul?
Everybody seems to try and identify or get close to God in shul.
Okay, I think you're being very kind. I think a lot of people who come to shul, and that's not what they're doing.
Okay, I forgot about the Kiddush. But...
I'm not even talking about the Kiddush. People come to shul, and it's a great opportunity to catch up on all the world news, personal news, the sport fixtures, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot. What do you say, talk and daven? I'm saying there's talk and daven, right?
Was under threat.
Okay. So that comes back to the Shema. The thing about the Shema, one of the reasons that we cover our eyes when we say the Shema is because it's supposed to simulate what it would be like to give up our life for Hashem. Everybody knows that the Shema is the line that people used throughout history anytime that people died for Hashem's sake. They said the Shema because it's a declaration of not only faith in Hashem, but specifically faith that Hashem is one. Right? Hashem Echad. That's really the unique aspect of the Shema. Not just that God exists, but that God is one. And as the Rambam explains, that one means that there's nothing else besides Hashem. And if there's nothing else besides Hashem, then obviously I can't trade my relationship with Hashem for anything else. So the Shema encapsulates that idea. But where it would be most expressed is what we call Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is where a person is threatened. And the nature of the threat is around their Judaism. So that's the threat where a person says either you give up your Judaism or, God forbid, you have to give up your life. And what we've seen throughout history is that Jews, without thinking about it, give up their lives. And the crazy part is that very often Jews who give up their lives for their Judaism did not necessarily practice Judaism before that point. That's what's so strange about it. So this is the all or nothing moment. It's all or nothing, right? Either you're in or you're not. And when a person is confronted with that reality, it is our default setting to say we're in. So, for example, there was there are many, many, many stories, right? But there was that story that I often think about where in the communist age, they wanted to shut down all Jewish life. Now, officially, even under communism, officially, you were allowed to practice your religion. They didn't do that in practice. And they came up with all kinds of legal reasons why they wanted to shut down Judaism. So one of them was about mikvahs. Now, a Jewish community cannot operate without a mikvah, right? I'm saying a women's mikvah. So in one particular instance, excuse they came up with to shut the mikveh was hygiene. They said that the mikveh, the water wasn't healthy and whatever. So that's how they wanted to shut down the mikveh. At that time, unfortunately, there were many secular communist Jews who were actively involved in fighting against Judaism. And one of them was a doctor. And he was brought as the expert witness by the state that this mikveh was a health hazard and needed to be shut down. Now again, this is a person who is on the side of the communists. He had no skin in the Jewish game. He wasn't involved in the community. He was fighting against religion. He thought he was one of these enlightened individuals. And eventually comes to the big day, the court case, and they call him as an expert witness to test the water and to share what kind of bacteria, or contagions, whatever is found in the water. So he gives his full medical report, his full scientific report. These are the lab results. This is what we found. The water's no good, etc., etc. But the judge needs a clear answer out of him. Is this a health hazard or is it not? Don't give me all the details. Is it a health hazard or is it not a health hazard? And based on his testimony, they were either going to shut the mikveh or allow the mikveh to continue. So they asked this guy, what's your verdict? Is this unhealthy water or not? And at that point, the doctor takes the vial of water that he had taken and he drinks it. Right? And you think, what on earth is going on over here? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. That's what Mesiras Nefesh is. Mesiras Nefesh is the all or nothing moment where we are confronted by the truth of our soul. Or to put it differently, Mesiras Nefesh is the moment that we realize I'm only half a shekel. But without Hashem, I'm actually nothing. So if there's going to be a scenario where I have to choose between everything else that life has to offer or Hashem, I realize I'm nothing without Hashem. I'm only a fraction without Hashem. So therefore, Mesiras Nefesh is one movement, one decision, one action that captures this concept of the fact that I'm nothing without Hashem. So the half shekel, which is specifically a half, because it's supposed to capture the essence of how I'm incomplete if I don't have a connection to Hashem, is a donation that has to be given in one shot, because the action that it represents is an action of I'm all in for Hashem. So when that pressure comes, when that dilemma arises, when that confrontation happens, then I'm going to make one snap decision to connect to Hashem. So you've got the paradox in the half shekel. On the one hand, it is a half denomination, because that tells us the story of how we cannot be without a connection to Hashem. Therefore, it is a singular action, because the way that relationship with Hashem will be expressed will be in a Mesiras Nefesh, which you can't have a little bit of sacrifice or a lot of sacrifice. It either is sacrifice or it's not sacrifice. In the same way as you cannot give an incremental half shekel, it's either a half shekel or it's not a half shekel. And so the half shekel encapsulates what seemed to be just like such a menial part of Judaism. It's a tax that you have to pay in order to run the temple. Turns out that it actually captures the essence of everything that being Jewish is all about. I am incomplete without a connection to Hashem. Therefore, I will throw everything into that connection if the need arises.